Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining our workshop today. The topic of the workshop is typical mistakes of improving players. What we are going to talk about? Well, I classified the most common pattern-based mistakes that chess players of your level, like improving club players, usually make, and we are going to analyze them, how they happen, and what you should be doing to fix them and to avoid making them in future. Okay, is there anybody who attends our workshop for the first time? We do our workshops regularly, but if there is anybody who attends it first, it would be great if you can introduce yourself. For example, tell which country you are joining from, and what's your current elo, even if it's just chess.com or lichess elo. The workshop is recording at the moment. Tomorrow I'm going to publish a post on chess.com regarding the topic, including the recording of the event and the PGNs of the games we are going to observe. So the recording will be published tomorrow in my blog on chess.com. Fine. Okay, what else? What else I wanted to share? Okay, we have Greg from the United States. Okay, hi Greg, and Greg's chess.com rapid rating is 1100. Well, not bad. I'm sure it will be helpful for you. Well, Greg, I think at this level, the best thing you can do is to work more on puzzles. Or you can just hire a coach. The coach will analyze your games and tell you what exactly you should be working on. So maybe not only puzzles. As for me, if you don't know, so I'm a FIDE master, Victor Neustoroyev. My current rating is 2256. It's a FIDE rating. On chess.com, it's around like 24 and something. Okay, so people are still joining. We are about to start. Okay. Yes, I think we can start. So maybe a few more people are gonna join us soon, but at least we can start with the main part. So, when you're trying to improve in chess, very often you keep repeating same mistake. Not in every game, but regularly. And our main task, and actually your main task if you want to get better in chess, is to recognize these mistakes, to classify them, remember about them, and avoid doing them in future. How? First of all, you should understand which type of mistakes you are doing often, and then every time you make a move, you should uh, remember about it. That's the best idea. And for example, today I was conducting the class. My opponent played a training game, and um, uh, his pawn on c4 was attacked with bishop e6. What did he do? He instantly played b3, like he usually does in such positions. But the position was completely different. He played this move mechanically, and compared to other positions, in that one that he had today, the enemy knight was on e4 attacking the other pawn on c3, so he played it instantly and completely didn't think about his opponent's reaction and blundered the pawn on c3 and later got a losing position. And well, maybe he was playing against a cheater actually, but he didn't get any single chance to overtake initiative. Anyway, so what are these mistakes? We can classify them. So it can be either blunders or tactical blindness. This is the most common type, and actually you can say that all mistakes you do are tactical blunders, which is not fully true, and you'll see it during the workshop. I'm going to illustrate other mistakes. So the first type are blunders or tactical blindness. This is the most common type, and the players just follow some basic principles and uh, completely forget to check what happens after they play the move or after their opponent played the move. For example, a player says, okay, I develop a piece, I should develop like my opponent. Okay, I just defend my pawn, I should defend it. And they do not notice, and they are not even trying to notice what's gonna happen once their move is played on the board. So every time when your opponent played, you should ask yourself, what does my opponent want with this move? And then you think about your candidate moves, choose the best among them, and then before making this move on the board, you should ask the last question. If I play this move on the board, how does my opponent react on it? Okay, so failing to identify a proper plan is the most common type of mistakes, according to Brian's opinion. It's common, yes. I cannot say it's very common, but it's common for chess players of different levels. That's true. So, what else? There is also stereotypical thinking mistakes in the opening. So, for example, a chess player automatically castles. So in the opening, well, in the opening we should usually castle, so we must castle as soon as possible. But there can be a situation when you automatically castles and the king becomes under the pawn attack, or maybe the castling is not needed at all because you're gonna trade queens and pass the game to a favorable endgame. Okay, so for those of you who joined us later, what we are going to talk about today, the topic of the workshop is typical mistakes of improving chess players. And first of all, I decided to classify mistakes. So we already talked about two types, just tactical blunders. And the second type is uh, the so-called stereotypical thinking mistakes in the opening. Like when you develop a piece and you do not pay attention to what may happen. So, for example, there can be a template for a club player like I should develop a minor piece in the very beginning of the game, so in the opening stage with every move. Well, yes, but you should also pay attention um, to the current situation. Maybe if your opponent deviates, you'd better make the same move, make the second move with the same piece and gain a tempo, and then develop. Maybe you delay castling and instead you do something dangerous for his position. Well, for example, the fried liver defense, there is a template sacrifice on f7. Sometimes it works, sometimes not. It's a standard procedure, but every time in every position, if you don't know this exact position, you should calculate it. So you should sacrifice on f7 blindly and hoping it works. What else? Chess players makes mistake by setting their pawn structure. So they wrongly put the pawns. Like they play like they are on autopilot. So, well, it depends. The pawns do not move back. That's why when you make a pawn move, you should be very responsible. And actually, I think, yeah, well, let's continue and then we will go through this example. This is a very this is a very representative example because, well, white just took on d5. It seems that black should immediately take back, but it's not clear how exactly they should take back. What else? The fourth type of mistakes are strategic mistakes. So the in the end game and middle game, and this is where the mistake that Brian told us about, when Brian could hardly identify which plan to follow. So, or for example, a chess player comes up with a wrong plan, and well, wrong plan is better than no plan at all. But even uh, I ask you, at least, maybe if not the best plan, but at least I ask you to find a logical plan that works in such a type of positions. So, so strategic mistakes fall into this category. Well, for example, let's say if you exchange the bishop for a knight, it's always good. Well, yes, often it is good, but again, depends on the position. You shouldn't blindly change the bishop for the knight for the bishop, hoping that later in the end game your bishop is better. Well, if the enemy knight is centralized and has a strong point or even the outpost in the center, then the knight will be better than the bishop. Well, what else? Well, there are some psychological mistakes. When you play a quick move in the winning position, but you completely miss that your opponent prepared a trap for you, which you can definitely realize if you spend time. But because you think, oh, okay, I have extra rook, the game is over. Oh, guy, thank you. It was a good game. So let me defeat you with a nice combination, or you even don't pay much attention, just advance the pawns. And in such a case, you may miss something. You may miss a specific trap. So don't play quick moves, even if you think it's absolutely winning the game. The game is not over until the clocks are stopped and the hands are shaken. So if it's an online game, then you should wait until the clocks are stopped. So do not relax too early. Okay, fine. So five types of mistakes. So let's do the analysis of this position. So what do we have? This pawn was captured, and well, what do you think you would play here? Well, so there was your pawn on d5, white took. So what should we take there? Looks logical. Or should we analyze first? Oh, okay, so Samir wants to play with the king and then advance the e pawn. Well, they won't blunder fork. They will move their rook back. Okay, anybody else? Sergio thinks that taking on d5 with the pawn is fine. John thinks king should take on d5. Any other suggestions? Ah, so you want me to what? To like break it down. Okay. Okay, fine. So it's just a suggestion. Okay, so there is also, well, this meeting is recorded as well as it is streamed on YouTube. So, and I'm also going to read some comments from YouTube too. There is Eric from the US with a US CF rating around 1300. Okay, but no suggestions. Okay, king d5 for pawn takes d5. Well, in the game, aha, okay, so Airlight suggests to capture with a pawn and then continue with c4. So my congratulations, you are playing as well as David Bronstein. I'm sure you know who was it, because uh, well, David Bronstein was a famous chess player, and even there is a time control popular in the United States, which is named after him, the Bronstein time control. So e takes d5, c4. This is exactly what he did, but it seems to me that he did it mechanically. He didn't really pay enough attention. Taking with the king and advancing the pawn makes more sense, but the best continuation will be to advance the pawn right away. How does it work? Well, if they, for example, move the rook back to avoid e4 in future, we can continue with king d5 and then advance this pawn and then attack the pawn there with f3, rook g2, and they would experience hard times defending it because we can also continue even with e3 after that. This bishop is out of the place of action then. Okay, so that's a good point, but you're moving forward too fast. Let's cover this line. So who can tell me which counterplay does black have in case of bishop c6? Rook c8. Well, if you want to sacrifice the rook, you'd better do it that way. But I think it's too much. If you wanted to play such a strategy, you'd better first take with the king and then start advancing the pawn. That would work. No, in this position, there is a better way you can play. c4? Guys, what's the... c4 rook b2. That's interesting. I didn't think about it actually because I found a better idea instantly, but maybe c4 is a nice idea too. Let me see. I think it doesn't work because they can sacrifice there and then take on c4, and this is where they have a compensation, and you cannot attack f2 with sufficient material. Okay, no, well, anything else instead of c4? Rook e8, oh, it's too slow. No, rook e8, you hang the rook. Yeah, the bishop covers it. No, well, but the idea of rook e8 is to play e4, so it should be e4 first. Why not? Let's see how it works. Well, it's a fork, and the only thing they can do is to take, but after that, f3, and the king has no squares. Well, I don't think the king can go that way, right? So the king has no other squares but to take on f3, and then you can still do the same thing. The king goes there, you take there, and it makes the position completely winning. You don't even need this pawn and this bishop. Take on a2, that's the end. So the idea is to play e4 and then f3 and open the position for the rooks and capture the enemy pawns on f2 and a2. Well, what else? Maybe they can play king e4 to stop it? No, then it works the same way. So king takes, and then you do the same thing, but the pawn on e5 is alive, so you don't sacrifice it. Well, actually, if you don't want to calculate anything, maybe just playing e4 looks good. So that's why after e5, it's really hard to suggest a good move, and it seems that white loses everywhere. How could David Bronstein miss it? I think that he just made his move mechanically. That's the reason. Well, you guys told me that it's possible to take with the king, and actually I agree with you. That move was stronger than a pawn move because e5 and e4 idea still exist and you can do it. Maybe he played quicker, right? But this was already move 50 something, 54, and you know that time when they played this game, there was a different time control popular. Chess players we played with the time control of 2 hours for 40 moves, 1 hour for 20 moves more, and half an hour until the end of the game. So that's why he probably had enough time to think. So it's not because of his because being low on time. It's mainly because he played it mechanically, I think. Okay. No, 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 no. They didn't. So e takes d5, rook d2. So bishop f6. He wanted to continue with c4. Yes, it's a protected passed pawn, but with the bishops of opposite color, it's better to attack. Because if we only had like one rook pair and the bishop pair, then I don't think the attack would be successful. I mean, if we trade rooks, I don't think it's black has any chances. But with the bishops of opposite color, if it's a middle game, you'd better focus on the attack of the enemy king. So bishop f6 was played to start advancing pawns. Rook a2. Well, and I actually don't know why. I think it was quite attractive to capture on h4. So the bishops of the opposite color favor the attacker in the middle game. And I think you know why. Because if we attack with our bishop, the enemy bishop cannot cover that squares that we attack with our bishop. So a player who attacks in the middle game first is likely to have more chances to win. So that's why every time when you have opposite colored bishops in the middle game or in the end game with a lot of other pieces, do the attack. So bishop h4 can lead to rook h4. Okay, so rook h4, and then bishop e8. That's right. Bishop f6, bishop takes there, bishop e5, and well, it still should be a draw, but c5, c4 seems like a possible strategy. Let's say rook d2. No, it's completely not. So rook d2, let's say what, c4? It should be a draw still. No, it's not. So I wanted to play rook b2. No, it gives up the pawn. So probably you're right. c4 gives up a pawn. But what to play instead? Just king e6, okay? So king e6 and then c4. So king. Yes. So Brian, it is very important to locate your pawns on light squares because your opponent has a light squared bishop. So if you, let's say, play this, they do that, then this. So with their bishop, they can cover everything. So they don't even need to take this pawn, but they may. They can play this and then set the bishop on c4, and that's it. You won't be able to do anything to attack. Well, your only chance will be to invade the back rank and try to capture there. That's why probably the best way is to attack that way and then continue with either bishop g6 or bishop f7 to get the bishop to d3. I actually think this. And now it's a complete draw. No way to progress. It seems to me. Well, yeah, there is something like that if it's possible with bishop b2, but I still doubt it works. Okay, anyway, so let's continue. So why is it still a draw? Should we play bishop c3? Okay, so rook d2. Let's king e6. Okay, rook f8. Why rook f8? Because I don't want to play king e6 because it falls under bishop g4. So maybe they decide to move the bishop, and now we can play king e6. Let's say rook e2. Finally, c4. Pawn takes, rook c2, and they cement the position. Bishop c2 works too, actually. And king e4 should be a draw. So unfortunately, it's not winning. Rook h4 was the best way anyway, but they played rook g7. So bishop e8, rook e7, traded pieces. Then, well, rook h8, rook takes there, doesn't work so well because of king g4. And if you check, it's king takes f4, so it makes no sense. But David Bronstein decided to play c4, and with this move he wanted to create a pass pawn, which also which didn't work neither. B takes, D takes, simply rook c1, and with rook c2 it's a fortress. So this rook b2, rook c2, and it's time to agree to a draw. No way to progress. So you can even take the pawn and bring the bishop back, but these pawns won't be promoted. There is always a possibility to hold a blockade with bishop c2, bishop b3. So just one simple mistake, capturing on d5 with a pawn, cost a half of a point for David Bronstein. So he should either play e5, e4, or king d5 and then e5, e4. Well, if so even if he just advanced like that and tried to attack f2 that way, that would work too. Okay, fine. So today I actually prepared more examples for you. Is there a recorded video? Yes, there is a this meeting is recorded, and the video will be published on my YouTube channel tomorrow, maybe even today. Okay, so what do you think? How black should play? It's a check, so there are basically we are discussing two moves in this position. One is king e7, the other one is rook f6. So let me mark them with different colors. So let's vote. Who wants to play king e7? Okay, or you can just write down in the chat rook king e7 or rook f6. What you think is better? Okay, so king e7. Is there anybody who wants to draw the game with rook f6? Of course, black is not playing for a win in this position. Their task is to draw. Nobody wants to play rook f6? Well, guys, so you're right. And this time you play better than Salo Floor, which I think is an achievement. So he played rook f6. And that's a blunder. The best strategy could be king e7, king d4, then maybe this move, but the king goes there, and rook b5, for example. The rook is a bit misplaced on b6. And it's much easier to break through the enemy position. For example, we can bring the rook to e6. Let's wait until they play this move, and then rook e1, rook e6. So white is, if not winning, then white definitely plays for a win in this position. But well, I think black can still hold it. Let's make a few moves to realize that. So, for example, white to move, white delivers a check, the king goes to d7. Actually, it's not an easy task. I just realized that we can just move the rook for here and back, and that's it. So it's likely to be a draw. I don't see the way how to win. Rook e6 sacrifice doesn't work. But sorry, just a sec. Rook e6, a sacrifice of the d pawn, doesn't work. In the game, it was played rook f6. So what should white do to win? Trade rook f4 maybe, and trade that way, if they take, of course. Rook c1, suggested by John. I wonder, rook c1, I didn't think about it even. Rook d1, suggested by Brian. Oh, well, Brian, I don't think it works. King e7, they can set the king as a blockading piece. Well, you probably have heard that the king is not a good blockading piece, but if it's the endgame with rooks, it's okay. Rook c1 to invade the... Okay, let's check rook c1. Rook c1, then... King f8. King f8, they check on c8 and check on c7. Ah, wait, okay, let's do this. The rook invades, but the king can secure everything here. And this is hanging, so it still should be a draw. But if you trade, it is a win. How to realize that this is a win? So if they take with the king, then we just go that way and promote, or take these pawns. But if they take with a pawn, how do we progress? If we play king d4, they just play b6 and stop us. Now, in case of king f6, it doesn't help, because this, b6, but the king goes to e4, and sooner or later this king has to move, and then we can invade the enemy camp with king f5. So, but if g takes f6, then king d4 doesn't look good. I think they can take, if you play b5. I think there's nothing wrong with a takes b5. King d4 b6, okay. Ah, yes. Yeah, but then this is hanging. No, that's winning actually. That's winning. So king e7, king b4, king d6, king b5. King d5, and you're winning because of the pass pawn. So that's why... You... Uh-huh. No, yes, king d6, king b5, king d5. That's losing. No, it's king a5 then. Oh, well, yeah, so much faster. So let's say this, 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 this. No, actually, it's already a mistake. So f5, b4, f4, b5, g5, king a7, 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 h5. So b6, g4, h takes, b7, f3, takes, b8, and the pawn only goes to f2. So king cannot go to b3. Why? In such a case, if the king goes to c4, we just go that way. They can take the pawn, but then they're gonna lose everything on the other side. Like that. And these two are easy targets too. So, yeah, that's why b5... No, the b5 is actually okay, but b6 is a wrong move. I didn't realize it. So this should be played, and once the king goes there, what should it be? I think it can be this. King takes, king d6, king c4. And then black should create a pass pawn on that side, which is very likely to distract the white king. And then I'm not sure if black is winning, but black definitely takes on d5 and then takes on b2, and they have a pass pawn. So maybe even black wins then. Okay, so let's reject b5 for now. And king d4, it's b6. So king d4, b6, b5 in this position, then it's a5, and there is no way to progress on that side. Even if you go there and trade pawns, you still cannot access the enemy territory on the queen side. So what do you think? Which move we are forced to play here? Well, this is actually what Saloflor was thinking about. He thought, okay, so I take with the pawn. In case of the exchange of the... Oh, let's go back. Let me explain it in more details. This is a bad pawn structure. In such a case, there is no way to convert a pawn majority, 3 versus 2, to a passed pawn. But if the pawn structure improves, then yes, there is a chance to convert this pawn majority to a passed pawn. And maybe this passed pawn technically can become the outside passed pawn. And so Salaflor didn't really calculate it, but he thought more strategically. So it was a strategic mistake. He thought, okay, so I improve the pawn structure. Now I create a passed pawn. And that passed pawn distracts the king, and then black invades the queen side. Okay, what are the factors we should take into account? And that this passed pawn is already far advanced. If it was on d2, no, d3. So it's already far advanced, and this is important. So what do you think? Which move we have to play now? The main factor because of which white wins is of course the king's activity and extra space, but a certain move is required. What is required? What do you think? Okay, h4 according to John. Bernice suggests g4. Okay, I don't think h4 is a good move. So they can play f5, let's say, and then king f6. So let's see. King here, king there, d6 to distract. And what may happen then? So if king is 6, then d7. No, it still fails even. But g5, chasing the king away and then capturing this pawn. And then black is winning. So, well, h4 doesn't look good. Anything else? Okay, it's g4. Why? Who can tell me why it's g4? It's a very important move that black overlooked. But to be honest, I think black just didn't consider this move at all. I think black stopped their analysis at the pawn structure change. When the g pawn from g7 goes to f6, he was thinking strategically. So this move separates the black pawns. That's right. So how does it work? Let's say they play f5. Well, they didn't play such a move in the game, but let's say they play this, h4, king f6, king f4, h5, and now we win. If there was only one pawn, or these were exchanged, there was only one pawn on f5, it would end in a draw. But because this pawn exists, it can get promoted. For example, this, king a6, this, and then you take on f5, and then you take there. So if there was no pawns, the king would just move to that side, but with pawns on the h file, white wins. What if they play king a7 and do not advance the pawns? This is what happened in the game. h4, king d6, the pawn must be protected, and sooner or later, white should do what? Should white play king d4 in this position? Yeah, it's almost a Zugzwang. There is black still has some moves and one inaccuracy. B3, so to provoke a Zugzwang. Okay, let me see. B3 actually works too. That's a nice move, b3, b5, but then you have to decide what to play. No, b3 is possible. It doesn't reveal the main idea of white in this position, but you can include b3 and b5. Now, why not? Okay, now h5. John, why h5? Oh, Georgios also agrees to play h5. So, Georgios, your opinion? To create a weak square on f5 and let the king to invade. That's right. So, h5. Yes, h5 wins. But you don't need to play b3 for that. Yeah, well, king d4 allows a typical breakthrough, f5. And then it's a draw. How? This, what? h5, let's say, f4, king goes there, f3, king goes there, this. And the biggest problem is that this king cannot attack the pawn on h6. So this, and after king f4, after king f6, I mean, the king should march back to f4 to prevent this pawn captured. So, for example, king d5, we can calculate it. King g5, king c6, b5, king b6, king takes h5, king takes a6, king to g4, king takes b5, h5, king a6, h4, b5. The pawns are promoted simultaneously, so it must be a draw. It's a breakthrough with f5 in such a case. So, oh well, maybe it's possible to play h5 in this position. What do you think? No, f4, h takes g6. It's losing for black because black cannot hold 2 pawns being so far advanced. So g takes h5 is the move. G takes f5. And now h4. And f6 is too slow because this king is inside of the square. So it's inside of the square of the pawn after f6. And this, for now, can jump inside. So this is a square. I can draw it with a different color. So this is a square of the black pawn. So king e4 or king e3 allows white to jump. But if f6, it's h3, and this square of a pawn becomes smaller and the king cannot get inside. But this is easily paired with this. And d6, just king f7. So that's why after h4, the king must go that way. h3, king f3. The only way to stop the pawn. Then this, f6, king e6, so it's fine. King g3, there. And because of this outside passed pawn, black is winning. So that's why h5 doesn't work. G takes f5 and promoting simultaneously is probably the best strategy. This is also a mistake. How to play h5 at least can be played, and after this it's this, and this is a Zugzwang which favors black. Black captures this pawn and then advances the f pawn. Fine, okay. That's why the move that should be played in this position is h5. You can include b3, b5, it doesn't change much, but h5 right away to allow the king to invade into the enemy territory. F5 this time doesn't work because this king is too close. So you can take, if they take, king takes. So now what? King d5, this, and then you promote. So king f6, for example, fails. Same thing happened later in the game, so I can show you, or I can show you here. So how to play? I think the best way is just to, okay, let's play king h7, king f7, then this move, and depends on how they play. So once they move the king, we can do that way. King f8, king g6. So b5 allows us to play b3, and then the king must move. And we escape and travel to the other side. If they play a5, it works too. How? Take, and just b3, provoking the king to move. So then we are able to escape. So they, of course, block our pawn, but we travel there, take and promote. If, let's say, they play g5 in this position, making a protected pass pawn, then f6 works. How? The white king goes to g6 and that's it. This pawn will be promoted earlier than this one. So let me illustrate this concept. So g4 right now is a mistake because g4, king f4, and none of these pawns can be captured. King d5, it's f7. If, let's say king d7, then this, well, if just a random move, it's king g6. g4, f7, g3, f8. And white promotes first. If king e7, then we include this move, but then we promote with a check, winning a tempo. So if they decide to bring the king that way immediately, then we don't have to rush. We can continue with d6 first. They must move somehow. King f8 or king d8 are both blunders. Actually, everything is a blunder already. So king d8, f7, and they cannot stop us. King d7, still f7 and f8. And this move, d7, and we promote. So g5 also is a mistake. So that's why after h5 they can hardly do anything. They decided to take. G takes, a5 was played. You can take, but the best way is just to ignore it and keep this pawn as far as possible from this king. So king f5. This means that, so that's why they took king f6, king d5, king g6. And what now? If they go that way, no, I don't think we should analyze it because it takes how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tempi. And for them it takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we are several tempi ahead. So this, and this is winning. There is a side maneuver, or the staircase maneuver. Depends on where the king moves. Also, there is one more pawn alive, but even if this pawn is captured, which we can easily organize, it's a winning position. Okay, so king g6, king e6, this is how they played. But after king h6, it's over. b3, winning a tempo. Well, they can play b5, but then we reach almost the same situation. And then the king escapes. If there, the king escapes here. So king f7, king g5, and that's it. So you see, if only they could play king b6, the game would end in a draw. But one tempo and white is winning. So king c6, king a5, and the pawn is promoted. Oh, king here, king there. And so on. And then you promote with checks. Fine. So rook f6 was a mistake, and black only considered some strategic aspect of this trade that they capture with a pawn, improve their structure, and potentially can convert these this pawn majority to a passed pawn. But they didn't realize that the most important factor is space and the king's position in the center. Yeah, sure. Like that? Where? No, ah, so not yet. So only after a pawn sacrifice. Let's see. So this king c5. Yeah, well, it works. But even if you capture the pawn on a6, I still think I'm okay, right? So b5, king b6, king here, there, this, king a5 is a must. Ah, b3 exists. No, I'll choose a different strategy then. Okay, let me just defend everything. That should be sufficient in my opinion. Yeah, then this is how it works. I cannot, black cannot win on that side because of the pawns being doubled. Okay, fine. So look at this position. White is almost winning, but black prepared something. If black somehow manages to take on h4 successfully, it can be the ladder made through the two files. So white to move, and actually black is already threatening with queen h3. White to move, what would you play? Brian, I'm sorry, but bishop g2 makes no sense. It's still queen h3. So if it's not bishop g2, what else left? White is actually completely winning, and I think I would play the first move mechanically. It's on a surface. So rook f8. Yes, it's rook f8. The move is on a surface. Well, rook f8, queen f8, queen takes, then what? They cannot block with a rook. There is a rook on h6 hanging, so the king must move to h7. After which, what? We can play queen f5 check, right? And then push the pawn to h5. There is no checkmate, but there is a huge material advantage for white. That's why it's completely winning. But probably after this move they may not take, but continue with king h7. What can you say about that? How to proceed? That's an interesting idea, I think. Okay, so Samir suggested queen e4. Well, okay, fine. Well, you can also deliver bishop e4 check. So what do you guys think? But it's still a check. But then the seventh rank is exposed. Queen e7 can be played. And I think it's checkmate. And with which rook you block on g6? So that's actually the biggest question. Which piece to move to e4? It seems that we should make a move with a piece which is less valuable, so with the bishop. And if rook g6, the g rook to g6, it's queen e7 mate in that position. And if it's the h rook, there is no checkmate anymore. So we can just take the queen. So that tells us that maybe there is no big difference which piece to play to e4. And let's start with the bishop. What do you think? Okay, so let's say we start with... Okay, so the queen move looks better. There is a certain... Yes, if we play with the queen, they can take our queen with the bishop, but then bishop takes, it's still a check. Now they play rook g6. Which rook? I don't think it matters. Then we can take that rook with a check, and later take the queen, and then we are what? A rook up? Looks good. Okay, so yeah, that's very important. Well, that was a game between two. These guys were not grandmasters. I think they were masters or candidate masters. So, and of course, Vladislav Rohlin playing with... Oh, no, Vladislav Silic playing with white pieces. He was playing against Yakov Rohlin. He played rook f8, yes, that's right. And again, if queen takes, that's completely fine. King goes there, queen f5 check. Moving the king back means we can bring the rook to the game. So, while one of the rooks should block, this rook it's h5. Or let's take there and then h5. Actually, I think it's better. So what else? If the other rook blocks, this rook, then it's h5 right away. No, there is no checkmate. But yeah, this rook. So what they can do? Take, we take, they move the rook, and now it is checkmate. So we can use our rook and then checkmate. I'm sure you can find it. But what you need to understand is that there is no checkmate to your king. If you are afraid of it, you can at least play that, which stops it. And if rook h5, it's queen h5. You win. You end with extra rook at least. Okay, so but king h7. And the biggest question is whether you should play with the bishop or with the queen. Well, I think that's the white player, Vladislav Silic, here made a psychological mistake. So he usually knows that we should play with minor pieces. He thought there is no difference, and he played bishop f4 and lost the game. Well, first of all, let's find how exactly he lost the game, and then we will define how well queen to e4 works. Right, so blocking with the rook. Yeah, it's queen f5, queen f5. So blocking with the rook makes no sense. So this leads to checkmate. This, there is no checkmate. So we can do what? We can take the queen just. Bishop takes, queen takes, it's fine. But queen f5, that was the key move. And because the bishop is completely pinned, we cannot take that queen. And now there is no defense. Rook h4 is the next move. There is no even check. Well, there is a check, but it makes no sense. And there is no way to defend there. So, but if queen e4, then queen f5 doesn't exist because just queen takes f5. There is still bishop covering our king. Well, if bishop f4, it works. Bishop takes, now what? The rook must block. Which rook? Well, if this rook, we take the queen immediately. Well, actually, in both scenarios, we can take on g6 first. If this rook, then to avoid checkmate, we should take on g6. Now, if they take there, we take the queen. If they take here, we also... So do you want to... Oops. Do you want to deliver this check first? Probably yes. And then you take on c8. And rook h4 doesn't lead to anything dangerous. You can escape. Can we go back to the rook h8 sacrifice? There was no rook h8 sacrifice. But yes, tell me where exactly we should go. So I wanted to look at queen f8. Ah, rook h8 sacrifice. But which there is no pin. Yeah, because you sacrifice the rook, the queen is no longer pinned. So no, it fails. Okay, so that was a psychological mistake. White thought he's completely winning and made his move quickly. Instead, he should analyze it and shouldn't overlook the queen f5 idea. Okay, so the next example. This is a complex position. Exchanging pieces is likely to lead to a draw. What black should do? Well, I think black should deliver a check to have some counter play. So this, queen d6, pinning that knight, then f4, then maybe queen b6 attacking the rook, then maybe taking there at a certain moment. I don't want to weaken the king too much, actually, but it seems to be okay. I can play f6 even if the rook moves back. So something like that. It looks okay. But in the game, Anish Giri, so not somebody else like Vladislav Silic or somebody no name, but Anish Giri plays queen d6. So at first it seems like he just improves the queen and gains the tempo. But what is he missing? Okay, guys, so think and suggest. So there was a Samir suggestion. We can go over it. I oh, okay, so we will go over it. So I wanted you to suggest the moves. Well, first of all, the idea was to pin the knight to the h2 square. So something like that is already a blunder. That's why knight d7 for sure not. So some may suggest queen f3 or knight f7 and then queen f3. But the problem is that knight f7 is not a check, and there is checkmate again with rook b1 and rook takes queen. So, and queen e3 fails because of the same reason. Rook b1 first, king h2, queen e5 or knight e5. That's why it should be queen h6. And if king takes, there is a nice fork that allows us to capture this queen. However, what about king g8? What if we just ignore it? Because rook a8 doesn't work. If rook a8 is played, it's simply rook b8. And black successfully manages queen h8, right? Actually, rook b8 fails too. I just realized it. Because of knight d7, it fails. I can show you. Yeah, but there is queen h8. So queen h6. King g8 and well, queen h8 leads to the same situation when the knight delivers a fork and the queen is won back. And because all moves are checks, there is no chance to play rook b1. Black has to defend their king. So this move, rook b8, is a mistake because of knight d7. If queen takes, the rook is hanging. If rook takes rook, it's knight f6 mate. So that's why it shouldn't be knight. It shouldn't be rook b8. It should be knight f8, I think, or knight b8. Yeah, maybe they both work. But after this move, queen h8 works perfectly well. Well, this is absolutely losing. Do you want to know what happened in the game? f4. So Alexander Morozevich didn't play queen h6. So here you can ask me, how is it possible? I don't know, to be honest. But it seems to me that it's another type of a psychological mistake. So Anish Giri, in that position, in this position with the queen on e7, thought, okay, so what are my candidate moves? He calculated rook b1 and he liked it, but then he decided, okay, it works better when the queen is already on d6. Can I play queen on d6 right away? And I think he made a very common mistake for many club players, not for GMs, but for club players for sure. He didn't consider his opponent's reaction. So he thought, okay, so I play this move, I am attacking the knight, they probably defend the knight or so. And he completely missed queen h6. So he didn't look for this counterplay. He didn't realize what the queen is doing, how the queen becomes the object of the attack when she comes to d6. So not paying enough attention to the enemy threats. That was his main mistake. And Alexander Morozevich made a psychological mistake. So he trusted to his opponent too much. It was not just a random person. It was Anish Giri. So really strong player, but how Anish Giri can blunder such a simple combination? Of course he can. That's why I shouldn't even look at queen h6. Well, I don't know what he had in mind. Okay, so after this, there is king f6 also. Why this is not a good move? This is not a good move because after queen f4, it's queen f7. So king g7 leads to checkmate. That's a good question, actually. This is a checkmate. And if king goes to h6, this is a checkmate. So maybe the king should go that way, but it's a disaster. Let's say, what should I do? Queen f7, or there is a better move? No, queen f7. King d8 is the only option. So what? Check? Anything else? So rook e8, if they block, I can take on d7. Queen takes rook b8 and then I take the queen. Or the queen blocks and I still take the queen. If not rook b8, then king goes to c7. And this should be a winning position too. I just don't know how to play. Well, okay, we can at least trade there. We cannot trade that way because of a checkmate. But I think we can trade with the queens. I'm not sure if it's winning. It should be winning, but do we have a better move? Yeah, let's do a better move. Let's just play f4 to maintain this pin and take advantage of it a little later. So white is winning anyway, even in case of king f6. Okay, fine. So we have more examples, two more. Oh, for example, the next one is Kasparov-Kramnik. However, before we continue, I would like to remind you that if you enjoy such a content and you would like to support me, you can donate using this PayPal link. I can share here in the chat and explain how it works. So you click this button, a pop-up window appears. Then you enter the amount you want to donate. It can be any amount. Then you click the PayPal button. It redirects you to enter your PayPal account, and then the money will be automatically delivered to my PayPal account. So I appreciate any help. Those of you who, for example, Europeans who has Wise, there is a possibility of transferring by Wise. It's even easier, maybe not. You just go through this link. My username there is Victor394. So once you are logged in, it's very easy to send the payment. Again, any amount, anything is, well, I appreciate any help. So it helps me to prepare the content better, as well as to pay salary to people who helps me to prepare these games. What else? What also I want you to know. So we are just this coming Friday, no, this past Friday, we started our group sessions, opening understanding for club players. The first lesson was conducted. There is a recording of this lesson, but this recording will be available only for the participants of this event. We do it in the form of a group lesson in Zoom with homework and so on. And if you are still interested in it, I kindly recommend you to enroll. So if your rating is under 1800, so you definitely gonna find this cycle of group sessions helpful. So if you're interested, you can enroll into it too. So if you miss the class, we do every Friday except this coming Friday because I'm traveling to Barcelona. So this is what we are going to cover inside this course, 12 lessons, and this amount was for 12 lessons. So the next lesson will be on the 3rd of April. We start at 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So if you are interested, you're welcome. You can pay the full course or you can pay on a monthly basis. So $49 per each month. So what is included? Well, these are live sessions, so you can attend it. You get the recording, you get the PGNs of the games analyzed, you get the homework. Okay, fine. So the link is sent. Yeah, it's 1800 FIDE, which is probably 1900 USCF. Let's continue with our main topic of the workshop, typical mistakes of improving players. Again, I share the screen. You can now see the board. Who can tell me which opening is it from? Brian, how can it be a Sicilian? Because the pawn is on c7. Like that. Yeah, but the c7 pawn exists. Instead, there is no pawn on the e file, so it's likely to be e6 or e5. Okay, thanks. Dan is absolutely correct. It's the Berlin defense of Ruy Lopez. And this is the famous Berlin endgame, which I hate so much because it's so boring and both players have to play strategically. Well, Garry Kasparov was good at everything. So that's why that wasn't a big issue, but well, the game ended in a draw. Well, what did happen? First of all, yes, this is a complex position. It's approximately equal. It's too early to say about the draw. So they can play for 3 results. White has extra space. The knight is well placed. This knight is also well placed. And Garry decides to grab more space on the queen side he plays before, which is fine. What black should do? Probably he should undermine the center with f6 to activate his rooks. But he played rook h5. Why? Who knows why? In this in the Berlin defense, both players has to maneuver and adjust their pieces. So that's why playing slowly was completely fine for such a type of the position. But rook h5 was already a mistake. What do you think Vladimir Kramnik missed? So what would you play? Okay, Dan thinks c3, Brian thinks g4. What else? Okay, that was a mix of a strategic mistake and the psychological mistake. So both players know that there is almost no tactics. There is almost no tactics in the Berlin defense, and both players have to play positionally. So that's why slow maneuvering was completely fine. But g4 actually provided white with a huge advantage. So g4 en passant, knight takes g3. How does it work? Why do we lose the pawn? Well, we lose the pawn because the knight goes to f5. How? Let me show you. So, for example, rook h3, rook takes d4, rook takes d4, knight f5. This is what Kramnik missed. Then white is up a knight for a pawn, but it's completely winning. So can he avoid it? No. After that, the rook is hanging and there is not much he can do. Sacrifice exchange that way? Well, no, it's still a rook d4 and then knight f5. So no, that was a knight for free, if that happened. Well, of course, at that moment, I'm sure Kramnik would start calculating h takes g3, knight takes g3, and then he would realize that no, it doesn't work, so he can simply move the rook back. But the rook back means that the pawn on g2 is no longer weak, and instead it allows white to grab space and control the f5 square. So that's why rook d3. And what did change? Now white has all chances to play for a win. So they can double, they can play c3 at a certain moment, they can bring the king, they can play f5. So they definitely play for a win in such a case. Well, so unfortunately Kasparov missed it. He played knight g5. But g4 was on the surface. He didn't analyze it because he just thought, oh, it's h takes g3, so it's like a template. I push the pawn 2 squares forward, there is en passant, which is a check, so... And then he intuitively stopped his analysis, I think. So the Kramnik reason, I think, was to play knight f5 or rook f5 or something like that, or maybe f6 and then rook d5. I think it was more about the f5 square, to attack the f4 pawn, like this. Knight... even if rook f5 first, this is a check. Okay, anyway, so he played knight g5 and completely missed it. And soon the game ended in a draw. So this, with the pawn on g2, he doesn't have such advantage. So knight e6. then they traded rooks, and this is completely drawing. So he played a5 even to activate the rook that way. And f4 is a weakness. The king goes to f5. If the pawn was on g4, I would keep playing it for white and would play for a win, but with the black king being so active, it no longer works. That's why, well, the game continued, and then they ended in a draw. They agreed to a draw. Okay, fine. Our next example. So the game between Bobby Fischer and Miroslav Filip. Well, white plays a4, logical, right? Black doesn't know what to do. So what would you play for black? Looks like it's a complex middle game with minor pieces and the queens. So white achieved some progress on the king side, but now with a4 they want to open the second front, invading, trying to invade with their queen, maybe like that, or like this, maybe to e7 after knights are exchanged on e7. I mean, that's the plan. So what do you think? How black should play here? Queen d7 to trade queens. Okay, it makes sense actually. Queen d7. But for queen d7, I think they're gonna play queen a1 and queen a3. Yeah, I don't think you can take there. No, I don't think you can do so. Where? Do you play knight e7 then? The bishop is better, that's true. So a takes b5, a takes b5, queen e8. Maybe you have to take with a queen then. Then maybe f6 is already a problem. Or let me first play queen e3. No, I think white is better. So I think white already achieved it. The bishop was better than this knight on f5. Okay, so bishop c8 and bishop b7 is the plan also. Ah, bishop b6. Okay, bishop b6 they take. A takes. I want to invade. So this, and then maybe queen here with queen a3 or queen a5. So looks like white achieves something with this, with a4. So what did happen? They played king f8, trying to bring the king closer to the place of action, aiming for the queen exchange. So queen f8, and Bobby Fischer plays queen e1, following his plan. Luckily, he still won the game, but what did he miss? Why king f8 move, which is a common move, because when we don't know how to progress and we see that the game is likely to get closer to the end game, then we should bring the king closer to the place of action. So that's why king f8 from a strategic point of view is completely logical. But what's wrong with it? Okay, so here John suggests queen h5. John, can you please specify how it works? I can draw an arrow. H7 is weak, and if the king goes back, queen takes g6. Yes. The king moved, and now h7 is weak. It should be protected. So king g8, queen g6 works, and after they take, you threaten mate, and if they take there, they lose their queen. So you threaten mate, they must take your queen. And then knight e7, and you win a queen back. So you have extra knight, and this knight cannot be trapped. It escapes like that. If, let's say, it's h6, then just g takes h6, and it's still losing position. What else? Bishop f5 maybe is a good move instead. Well, yes, it's better, but after e takes e5, there is a knight and the pawn hanging simultaneously. And there is no light squared bishop to utilize the light squares in the white camp. So, unfortunately, Bobby played queen e1, and the game continued with bishop c8, queen e3, king g8, 8 takes b5, and queen a7. So somehow he managed to win. But that was a critical mistake to play that way. Okay, so what, guys, you need to know and what procedure you should follow when if you want to avoid making such a mistake. So every time, no, how to stop making such mistakes. Every time you should go through the certain algorithm. So you should answer questions. What are they? So you should ask yourself, so whether the move that you make weakens something nearby, or the move where you move a queen, or a square where you move a piece is attacked or can be attacked. Also, the most helpful question you should ask is, does my opponent have a reply that breaks my plan? Every time when you decide to make the move, ask yourself this exact question. Does the opponent have a reply that breaks my plan? And most likely you will answer properly on that question and either play that move, which will be correct, or refuse it and look for something else. And what else? If you take a decision based on some strategic aspect, ask yourself, does this rule or does this strategic principle really apply in this position? Or the position should be played according to other principles, for example. So, well, at least ask yourself if your opponent has a move or or your opponent has a response that breaks your original plan. At least that will eliminate maybe 70% of your mistakes that you can typically make just making moves based on the templates, on the same patterns. Okay, so I'm sure today's workshop was helpful for you. What's your opinion, guys? How did you like it? Oh, and next week there is no group session on Friday, but there will be but there will be a workshop next Sunday for sure. I'll be back home, so I will conduct it. Okay, so I'm glad that you like it. So thank you for coming. I hope to see you next Sunday at the same time. And if you like it, and if you have friends, chess players, please invite them to this workshop too. So thank you for coming and see you next week. Bye bye.